This is Storybook Radio.
Chapter 19. The Omniscient sits at an opulent, intricately carved desk inside the highest chamber of the Odyssey. The room is vast, its walls adorned with holographic projections of shifting constellations. His focus is absolute as he writes on a glowing scroll with thought ink, the ethereal substance streaming effortlessly from the quill in his hand. Each stroke imprints words onto the parchment, the ink swirling with a life of its own before settling into sharp, celestial lines. His expression is one of calm determination, his golden eyes gleaming with purpose. A sudden, sharp knock reverberates through the room, breaking the stillness. The Omniscient pauses mid-stroke, his quill hovering over the parchment. His head tilts slightly, and his eyes narrow, as if anticipating who stands on the other side of the door. For a moment, he remains still, the scroll before him glowing faintly in the dim light. With precision, the Omniscient sets the quill down and rises from his chair. His movements are fluid and commanding as he strides to the massive iron door. Pulling it open, he reveals Paragon standing there, his presence calm, yet undeniably commanding. "May I come in?" Paragon asks, his tone casual yet carrying an undertone of curiosity. The Omniscient steps aside, gesturing for him to enter. Paragon steps into the chamber, his eyes widening momentarily as he takes in the room's grandeur. The chamber is a vast, circular space, its walls alive with holographic projections of shifting constellations and faint glowing glyphs that pulse with a rhythmic hum. The ceiling stretches impossibly high, disappearing into a swirling nebula of soft blues and golds, as if the room itself exists at the edge of the cosmos. In the center stands the Omniscient's opulent desk, carved from a single piece of obsidian and inlaid with veins of molten gold that flicker faintly like trapped fire. The floor beneath them is made of polished black marble, reflecting the light from an array of floating, orb-like lamps that drift silently above. A faint scent of ozone and aged parchment fills the air, completing the otherworldly atmosphere. Paragon adjusts his coat and steps forward, pulling out a chair and seating himself across from the desk. The Omniscient returns to his seat, his posture relaxed, but his gaze sharp. "To what do I owe the pleasure, Paragon?" the Omniscient asks, his voice smooth, laced with amusement. Paragon leans back in his chair, crossing one leg over the other. "I've come to discuss your plan," he replies evenly. "You've been busy." A faint smirk tugs at the corners of the Omniscient's lips. He leans back slightly, his golden eyes alight with a mix of confidence and intrigue. "World domination tends to require a certain level of commitment," he quips. The tension in the room thickens as Paragon studies him, his expression thoughtful. "And what happens if they learn the truth?" he asks, his voice steady but pointed. "What if people understand the gray theory? What if they fight back?" The Omniscient waves a dismissive hand, his arrogance palpable. "Rebellion?" he scoffs. "Unlikely. They're sheep, Paragon. They'll follow wherever I lead." Reaching for the scroll, the Omniscient unfurls it with a flourish, holding it up for Paragon to see. The thought ink glows ominously, its swirling patterns casting unsettling shadows across the room. "Let me show you what's to come," he says, his voice low. The 5-day plan. The Omniscient gestures to the first section of the scroll, where the glowing words shift and settle into clarity. Day 1. "Every thought will be made public," the Omniscient declares, his voice steady. "No more secrets. Those with intrusive thoughts will face immediate annihilation. Honesty will reign supreme." Paragon's expression remains neutral, but his fingers tap rhythmically against the armrest of his chair. Day 2. "Humans will be forced into a single-class system. No more divisions of wealth or power. Families will be separated, loved ones distanced. They will exist solely under my control." The Omniscient's voice carries an almost religious fervor, his golden eyes alight with conviction. Day 3. "Anyone guilty of taking another's life will be eliminated. Violence will cease to exist." He pauses, his gaze fixed on Paragon, who shifts slightly in his seat. A flicker of unease crosses Paragon's face, but he says nothing. Day 4. "Dreaming will be abolished," the Omniscient continues, his tone growing colder. "Humans will lose their connection to the spiritual and imaginative. They will no longer escape into fantasy." Day 5. The omniscient's voice crescendos as he reaches the final decree. All human memories will be erased and reprogrammed. A new history will be written, one in which I am their sole creator and ruler. He lowers the scroll, the thought ink shimmering ominously. Do you understand now, Paragon? He asks, his smirk widening. This world will bend to me. Resistance is futile. Paragon's gaze lingers on the scroll, his expression unreadable. Slowly he rises from his chair and adjusts his coat. You're thorough, he says, his tone neutral. I'll give you that. The omniscient watches him with amusement as Paragon walks toward the door. Leaving so soon? Paragon pauses, glancing over his shoulder. I've heard enough, he replies. I'll see you when it matters. With that, he steps out of the room, closing the door softly behind him. The omniscient's smirk fades as his eyes linger on the door. Amusement and disdain flicker across his face before he turns back to the scroll, resuming his meticulous work. Across the world, televisions flicker to life, interrupting regular programming. The omniscient's image fills the screens, his golden eyes glowing as he addresses the masses. The broadcast emanates an unrelenting authority, his presence larger than life, as he commands the attention of millions. Citizens of the world, his voice booms, rich and commanding. A new era begins now. In a small living room, Valerie sits frozen on the couch, her face pale and drawn. The warm glow of a forgotten lamp in the corner seems at odds with the chilling words spilling from the screen. Her hands grip firmly into her seat, with the weight of his words pressing into her like an immovable force. When the broadcast reaches day 3, her breath catches. Anyone guilty of taking another's life will be eliminated. The words echo in her mind, dredging up memories she's fought to bury. Her stomach churns, and her hands tremble as the screen shifts back to the omniscient's cold, calculating gaze. Beside her, Del watches in silence, his jaw clenched so tightly it might crack. He glances at Valerie, his sharp eyes catching the tremor in her hands, the haunted look in her gaze. He wants to speak, to offer reassurance, but the magnitude of what they're hearing leaves him momentarily paralyzed. The broadcast continues, each decree hammering home the reality of the omniscient's domination. A sense of foreboding settles over them both as the plan unfolds, leaving no room for hope. The screen fades to black, but the tension in the room remains, heavier than ever. Valerie exhales shakily, her thoughts racing like a freight train on the brink of derailing. What do we do now? She whispers, her voice barely audible over the echo of the broadcast in her mind. Del's gaze hardens, his usual calm replaced with a simmering resolve. We find a way to stop him, he replies, his voice edged with steel, and we'll do it together, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, in another part of the house, Phoenix sits alone in a darkened room, his hands buried in his hair, as the omniscient's words replay in his mind. The broadcast has struck something deep within him, an old wound reopened and bleeding. The weight of the decisions he's made, and the ones yet to come, presses down on him like a vice. The painting at the foot of his bed quivers, the omniscient's image within its frame twisting and shifting. Phoenix's head snaps up, his heart pounding as the mocking visage stares back at him. Did you think escaping the dream world would save you? The omniscient's voice taunts, low and insidious. This is only the beginning. Phoenix's jaw tightens as he stands, his fists clenched at his sides. The room feels suffocating, the air thick with unseen tension. But as fear wrestles with defiance, a flicker of determination ignites in his eyes. We'll see about that, he mutters, his voice steady despite the storm raging within him.